Okay, BOMAQtalk, we're back for the second hour on Talk B, Stage 3, Modification, the modification problem. Internal, talking about internal transfers, AI context, carryover, and data leakage. And um, this conversation or this series, um, our 10 core AI powered 10 core. um, it covers core 1, operations. And we should throw core two in there because we're talking a lot about human capital, right? So people, we're talking about people um, and hybrid organizations where we are hybrid, having human job description roles and AI digital identity role definitions. So um, we have core 1 operations, core 7 boundaries, core 8 technology, and core 9 asset life cycles um, on the promotional image for this series. But core 2 also should be on there. We've been talking a lot about human capital and the organizational structure. So have to throw that in there as well. Core 2, human capital. Um, and you can look at our assessments for core 1, core 2, um, core 7, 8, and 9. All right, so the new transfer problem. We touched on this a little bit. We're going to go in a little bit more depth. In this hour, the original transfer problem when someone changes roles or client assignments, access to old roles, assets must be stripped, should be stripped, while the new roles, assets are provisioned, right? And uh, this is a judgment call, right? For those who have the role of administrator and oversight in these areas, there may be some role overlap. In the case of role overload or inappropriate provisions, then the latter should apply, right? So the classic failure mode was data leakage, confidential information from a previous engagement carrying over into a new one through residual system access or cognitive carryover. The AI specific version adds a third carryover vector, AI context, the vector database memory that accumulated everything from the previous client engagement, the prompt library developed specifically for that client's industry, regulatory environment, and strategic vocabulary, right? All composed for a specific entity. The fine-tuned model or RAG knowledge base built on the client's proprietary data. The AI meeting transcripts that capture 2 years of confidential client strategies discussions. When someone transfers, these assets do not automatically reset. They travel with the person if stored in a personal account. They may or may not be in scope for the access stripping process, if stored under an organizational account, right? Either missing some accounts there that you don't have access to, depending on whether anyone thought to include them in the transition protocol policy contracts, right? Say, if this happens, what you have still belongs to us. Um, and um, any appropriate uh, access duplicates, should be deleted, those types of things. Um, Wordsmithed, whatever the um, vehicle should have something in place. But in most organizations right now, it's just disruption. There's nothing, there's nothing in place currently, right? So we're BOMAC talking it out, so you can kind of think about that, right? Um, uh, three. Let's go through three scenarios here. three AI context carryover scenarios, right? Scenario one, the prompt library carryover. This is when a consultant spends maybe 18 months on a financial services client. They develop a refined prompt library for generating regulatory analysis, competitive intelligent summaries, and board-ready strategy decks in the client-specific format and voice, right? Not uncommon to now the work that we know with AI. So that library is stored in their personal AI account. They rotate a new financial services client. They bring the prompt library with them because it's in their personal account, and they think of it as a personal methodology, not client IP. But embedded in those prompts is the first client's regulatory context, competitive framing, and strategic vocabulary. And so when those prompts generate outputs for the new client, the intellectual fingerprint of the previous engagement is present, um, either known or unknown, right? Because so it could be tangibly known, and maybe there's some intangibles in there. Maybe some things were deleted, and there's some intangible aspects or whatever in there that are still present, right? This is category two AI generation data leakage, not malicious, but still a serious professional liability, right? And so, scenario two, the vector memory carryover. A project manager uses an AI assistant with persistent memory throughout a 2-year client engagement. The vector database accumulates a rich model of the client's organizational dynamics, their key personnel, internal tensions, conflicts, challenges, and then strategic solutions and priorities and solutions, right? And so this memory makes the AI assistant extraordinary for the engagement, right? To help sort through that and can answer complex contextual questions instantly uh, to the benefit of the project managers. The project manager transfers. The vector memory is not reset. The AI assistant continues to operate with the full context from the previous client encoded in its memory. When the project manager asks questions in the new engagement, answers may be contaminated by the previous client's institutional context. The AI will not flag this. It will answer helpfully, drawing on all available context. And this is a category three AI context carryover, a data governance liability um, uh, and you as the technology, your technology oversight over AI tool vendors, uh, uh, you'll have to vet whether or not those AI tool vendors make it easy to audit or reset, and what the process, policy, and procedure uh, um, to solve this problem, right? And so scenario three, the AI note taker archive. Firm uses an AI meeting note taker across all client engagements. Transcripts and summaries are stored in the platform, uh, hopefully maybe under the organizational accounts, right? And with all organizational accounts, there comes a fee. And with that, right? Personal accounts, there come a fee. With these role-based access, uh, there's a fee associated with that, right? So a consultant transfers. Nobody reviews their note taker access. They retain access to the previous client's full meeting archive. And this may be common. Project managers, um, well, project managers usually will manage at least 11 minimum, where somewhere in there, 11, 12 projects, per year. Um, if they're depending on the size of the projects. If they're 2-year projects, 1-year projects, 120-day projects, depending on what the project type is, um, and the skill sets of the project manager, right? So, um, there may be some permissions and access that are overlapping. Um, and so that's a judgment call for those owners, managers, administrators overseeing this process or whatever, right? So um, in this case scenario, they retain access to the previous client's full meeting archive. Months later, doing work on a similar strategic challenge with a new client, they pull up in an old transcript to refresh their memory on how the team approached a comparable problem. They are being efficient. They're committing a serious, but they're committing a serious confidentiality breach. This happened because the AI note taker platform's access was not included in the bilateral transition protocol. The category 3 asset was not treated as requiring role-based de uh, deprovisioning, right? And so um, this, in some instances, could be a serious confidentiality breach. In some instances, it may be necessary if you are trying to um, create consistency along a certain product or service that you're delivering, right? And so, case by case scenario, um, look at these um, conditions to uh, make a judgment call as to how they should be handled, right? Um, bilateral transition protocol, these AI additions, right? So simultaneously with the traditional access stripping, right? Number one, revoke AI agent credentials for old role tools. Two, audit the prompt library. What is firm IP? What is personal methodology? What is jointly developed, right? Number three, review vector memory. What client context is stored? Does it require um, partitioning or a reset? Number four, revoke access to AI note taker archives from previous client engagements. These four steps are uh, will probably not will increasingly become not optional additions, right? Um, as the risks increase, they are AI era version of access stripping, the access stripping step, right? And I think because we've gotten so comfortable in human capital access, I think that adding AI to this is going to actually tighten up the whole process, um, in my opinion. So, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. So the AI context handoff protocol. So uh, let's BOMAQ talk what that could look like, right? So not all AI context should be destroyed at transfer, right? As an indicated, it's a judgment call. Some is genuinely valuable institutional knowledge, project knowledge, process knowledge that should be preserved and handed off. The governance challenge is distinguishing between what needs to be transferred, what needs to be retained by the organization, and what needs to be isolated or destroyed, right? And so there's a process there. And so the AI context handoff protocol, right? Consider having a protocol for that. Three steps. First, inventory, the departing person and their manager jointly document every AI context asset associated with the old role. Should be documented, written document. Prompt libraries, vector memory summaries, AI note taker archives, fine-tuned model states, RAG knowledge base contributions, everything that would be associated and applicable to the inventory. The inventory doesn't need to be file level exhaustive, um, and probably will not be comprehensive. But it does need to identify what exists and where it lives, you know, um, overall framework, infrastructure of it, so you can begin to categorized. So second, classification. Each item is classified as transferred to the incoming person or team, retained in the organizational archive, or isolate and destroy. The classification is based on two criteria. Does the asset contain client confidential information the incoming person should not have or should have? And does it have ongoing operational value that justifies retention long term? And so items with client confidential information from previous engagements are quarantined or destroyed. Items with ongoing operational value are transferred under organizational ownership. Items with neither are deleted, right? And so this is applicable to even services and products and different areas of an organization or a firm, right? And so um, third, execution. Transfer items. Thirdly, right? So secondly is classification. Firstly, inventory. Then thirdly is execution. And execution is always a challenge. Implementation, always a challenge. You have a plan to plan, backup plan to the plan, but if it's not executed, if it's not implemented, um, that's where the value is captured, right? So transfer items, move to organizational accounts or designated successors. Retain items, um, retain items, move to and move them to the appropriate archive. Isolate items are quarantined pending a retention review. And then items to be destroyed are deleted with deletion confirmed. The AI context handoff is a governance conversation, right? Not just a technical process, right? And so the governance decision drives the technical execution, right? So let's go back to our um, scenarios. Scenario one, uh, where we talked about the prompt library carryover, right? And so um, we're going to give some industry specific example, kind of set it up, the problems are, and then suggest a solution to consider based upon what we've talked about already, right? So industry, hey, professional services, management consulting, management consulting. So um, uh, a senior consultant, like I said, spends 18 months working for a major retail banking client. Um, and to streamline their work, they build a highly customized library of AI prompts in their personal AI account to draft regulatory compliance reports, market analysis, and executive board decks using the specifics, that specific bank's terminology, strategic framing, and risk tolerances. The consultant is then transferred to a brand new corporate banking client in the same sector, brings their prompt library along, viewing it as a personal efficiency tool rather than client property, right? So the problem in plain terms is even though the consultant has no bad intentions, their AI prompts still contain the exact strategic vocabulary and competitive framing of the first bank. And when they use those same prompts to generate reports for the new client, the digital fingerprint of the first bank's confidential strategy leaks into the new documents. These creates an invisible, unforced data leak and a massive professional liability for the consulting firm, right? And so we've kind of talked this through already, but wanted to reiterate. So the solution, AI audit solution consulting firm implements this bilateral transition protocol. When the consultant is reassigned, human capital triggers a mandatory AI asset audit. The automated system flags the consultant's personal prompt library contains proprietary sector framing for the first bank. The system automatically copies the broad structural prompt templates to the incoming team as firm IP while forcing a secure wipe of the client-specific terminology terminology from the departing consultant's account before they log into the new client portal, right? So um, you can consider a bilateral transition protocol, policy, procedure, process um, in order to have AI audit your system, your process, other AI. Um, for the for real estate, the vector memory carryover, real estate development, property management, uh, the project manager utilizing the AI assistant with persistent long-term memory, managing that 2 year commercial, in this case, maybe 2 year commercial skyscraper development. Over time, the AI's vector memory database automatically learns and remembers everything about the project, even though you forgot it. The AI remembers, has vector memory, the developers, internal office politics, friction between specific subcontractors, right? Because AEC always has friction. Um, the architect and engineering, construction relationship always has some kind of friction in there, right? And so it may pick up on that through note taking and all those and all the documents that is input, secret financial margins, profit margins. Um, the project manager is then transferred into a new residential master planned community, right? Being developed, uh, multi-acre development. But the AI assistant's memory has never been wiped or reset, right? So the problem, in plain terms, the AI assistant continues to operate with all the secret data from the skyscraper project deeply embedded in its brain. When the manager asks the AI general questions about budgeting or subcontractor negotiations for the new residential project, so we're talking about commercial versus residential, the AI helpfully but blindly draws on the hidden context of the old project. It blends the two together in its answers, contaminating the new project with confidential data from the old one, completely hidden from um, standard tracking tools, right? And so uh, consider AI audit solution um, where you deploy an automated AI memory partitioning tool. Upon detecting the manager's transfer in the human capital system, the tool automatically queries the AI assistant's background logs. It detects that 2 years of skyscraper project data are active in the assistant's memory. Before the manager can start their new assignment, the system enforces a hard reset of the AI's local vector cache, quarantining the old project memory into a secure corporate archive and giving the manager a clean AI assistant for the residential project, right? So um, then our scenario 3 for AI note taker archives, right? I went into a meeting, what was it, yesterday? It was more note takers in there than people. Um, and so sometimes the count now, it may say X amount of people in there, but it's not calling real people. It may be AI note takers, right? And so um, the industry for this scenario, advertising, digital marketing, right? We're all in digital marketing now. You, we all have companies that are uh, marketing digitally. So, um, but for this kind of real world setup, it's a large ad agency, right? Advertising agency. And they're using an automated AI bot to record, transcribe, and summarize all internal and client-facing meetings, which we all are doing, right? Because everybody has meetings. Nobody really wants to be in the meeting, but they want the content, right? And so AI bots get it done. The transcripts are saved inside the AI platform under the agency's corporate account, controlled by standard user login policies, rules, processes, regulations. A creative director spends a year leading a top secret campaign for a major automobile brand before being reassigned to a rival car company's account. And that can happen because they say, "Ooh, they did a good job for them. Ooh, let's go there," right? However, nobody revokes their access to the old project folders inside the AI note taker platform, right? And so, um, depending how your data lineage is stacked for project files, there may be some access that is revoked and some access that's not revoked based upon um, your project manager uh, role definition, job description, right? Um, may give you access. Yeah, project manager and digital marketing too. They're managing different types of projects, uh, managing an ad campaign project, right? So um, the problem is that months later, the creative director um, manages this ad campaign. So, in a sense, is managing a project, wants to see how the agency previously handled a complex digital rollout. They log into the AI note taker, still got access to that, pull up the transcripts of private strategy meetings from the first car company and read through them to find inspiration. While the employee thinks they are just being efficient and they have actually committed, this is a client confidentiality breach because their access to the old projects AI recording library was never cut off when they switched teams, and it may not even be contractually outlined as being property of the client. Um, uh, Contract wise, uh, when a contract can outline what deliverables um, are ownership of the client, and so they may not even be contractually considered. Um, Consider this AI audit solution. The agency links its central identity management system, whichever whichever that is, to the AI note taker via by way of an automated um, role access blueprint, right? And so um, the identity management system in some ways would be a technology stack that may include human um, capital um, options, talent acquisition, those types of things. So the moment the creative director's client portfolio updates to the new car company, the system automatically runs a cross check. It identifies their lingering access to the old car company's meeting archives as a high risk situation. The system strips their viewing permissions from these specific historical transcripts, eliminating that risk and that tendency, of this accidental data snooping. What did I do before? Let me do it again. Um, when dealing, and this is since we are creatures of habit, at times when we are doing B2B, B2G, even B2G, business, business to government, um, within an industry, you can have, you know, 5 or 10 owners, managers, administrators in a certain industry, and they may be all in the same line of business, but each business will differ based upon the owner's vision, um, where they are in their business. So many factors go into uh, the solutions um, that are applicable to a business case by case. Um, and because we are creatures of habit, it is so easy to blanket certain items under systems. There are so many systems out there. We got the 10 core, right? We use the 10 core, um, and we have systems and frameworks and infrastructures, but they have to be modified based upon each situation. Um, and I would say the same for any system that you may use. You may not use 10 core. Um, there are other firms that have another framework that may work better, and that's okay. Um, Even with our frameworks, we utilize them with the understanding that owners, managers, administrators, and their business, their organizations um, are unique in as human personality, right? So there's no human that's the same. Um, and your approach organizations and businesses the same, there's none that are the same. They have things that are in common. They are in common, um, so that they're identifiable, and you draw upon the things that are common to have some consistency. So the 10 core is more about, okay, this is what we all have in common, the problems that we all have in common, the areas that we all have in common that we have to address. But then the solutions and how we address them may differ slightly. And that's the understanding that I'm trying to pull out of this particular scenario, right? So, um, scenario number 4, and I think this is our last example for this particular talk. So, scenario 4, the AI context handoff protocol, right? The industry where we're going to set up the real world setup is in the aerospace, manufacturing, and defense engineering, right? So the chief engineer spends 3 years using specialized AI tools. It's up and coming to design a proprietary drone um, um system, and they developed highly effective AI prompt templates for testing stress tolerances. They built a custom AI research library and fine-tuned a machine learning model on factory test data, right? Um, and I've seen demonstrations on fatigue tests and some of these tests, and what they were doing previously now can be done. It's just is mind blowing what can be done in the time frame and the pace to which it's done, right? So real world situation, real happening now, right? So the engineer accepts an internal transfer to lead a commercial aircraft division instead of just deleting everything or letting um, the engineer instead of deleting everything or letting the engineer take it all with them, the department head initiates an AI context handoff protocol, right? So we give it a fancy name so we can kind of talk about it. You can call it something else. Um, you can stack it some other way. But so that we can convey the information with some consistency, right? Some commonality. Uh, we're gonna call it AI context handoff protocol, right? Um, what's the problem? The manager and engineers sit down to categorize the AI assets. They identify that the fine-tuned model and test data contain strict military secrets. So they immediately isolate and lock down those systems so the engineer can no longer access them. However, they realize that the general prompt templates for testing stress tolerances are incredibly valuable um, uh, asset, to the firm. So they formally transfer ownership of those prompts to the incoming replacement engineer, ensuring the team's AI-driven institutional knowledge, right? Knowledge management, is that knowledge management activity happening, isn't lost during this staff transition, right? So great example of knowledge management and transfer of organizational knowledge, right? Institutional knowledge. So the AI audit solution, the firm can mandate this digitized, what we call an AI context handoff uh, protocol and workflow, right? Because you get the protocol, the procedure, and then there's a workflow that kind of a process that accompanies that. Policy doesn't stand alone. It has to be activated with some activity. So before the engineer can officially sign off on their transfer, the system generates a visual inventory of every AI associated tool, prompt library, and fine-tuned model state tied to their account, employee account, project account, project accounts. The engineer and manager use a simple dashboard to classify each item. Military-grade assets are immediately flagged as isolate and quarantined, while the stress test libraries are tagged as transfer to successor, right? And so allowing the new team to immediately adopt the verified engineering prompts without security gaps, right? So that's just an example. You can have it say whichever and whatever, however you want to articulate that, but it's just giving an example, right? So hope that clarifies things. It clarified it for me because I have to have um those neat little stories, right? So we're filling them in. We're filling in those neat little stories because we gotta have them to make it applicable. It's one thing to just talk about the process and the framework and everything, but to see how does it actually work in application. Got the plan, but we need to implement it. So uh, is there individual protection at transition, right? Because this is a gray area right now between organizational accounts and personal accounts and um, permissions. There are some infrastructures that don't have the permissions for AI, but individuals need those uh, skill sets that AI provides to advance in their roles. Um, and they're being told that if you don't know AI, then you'll be replaced by someone who does. But some of those organizations don't have the proper governance or permission to actually use AI within their departments or divisions and stuff like that. So it's very conflicting. So the modification stage um, is where individual professionals may be the most vulnerable to having their own AI assets treated as organizational property, right? Um, without their knowledge or uh, maybe by default, um, and consider just some practical guidance, if you are a professional individual in that conflicting state for any role change, internal, external, do your own AI context inventory. Know by contract what's required and what is gray and what needs to be defined, um, so that down the line you're not getting your coattail pulled, right? And so know what you have, where it lives, and what it contains. Understand which items are clearly firm assets built on firm time, using firm tools for firm clients. Understand which items you can consider personal methodology and have the ownership conversation proactively in written, written documentation before the transition is announced, right? And in personal methodology, I'd like to add industry methodology. There's some industries that the methods to which we use in industry is open to everybody, and you have some unique variations of that give, certain firms and organizations or some owners, managers, administrators a competitive advantage, or that's their edge. But then there are some processes that's industry standard, is standard practice. It's in their handbook of practice for that industry. And so that's well known and is uh, generally up for grabs, right? And so before the transition is announced, be proactive on that. Be aware that AI memory systems may retain client context in ways that are not fully visible or controllable. It's intangible and sometimes out of your reach. um, uh, it takes some getting to, takes some getting to, right? And so before transferring to a new client assignment, consider review and where possible reset needs to happen in terms of the memory of any AI tools you use in client-facing work. This is not just kind of organizational governance. Now it's your personal accountability, professional due diligence, and this can be written um, within the context of an employee contract, right? And that governance can be a part of your role definition or your job description. That needs to happen, and that you're responsible and accountable for that, right? So, and then document your own contributions, right? Um, uh, Documentation, written documentation, um, a log of your own uh, could be the best protection against having your AI generated IP treated as generic organizational property. Um, uh, and provides this clear record of when you developed it, what problem it was solving, and how it reflects your personal methodology, or the value you bring to the project, to the division, to the team, to the organization, right? And the ability to be possibly compensated for that, right? Whatever the form that may take, right? So um, it's something worth BOMAQ talking about because there's so many gray areas in there now. This disruption, as you can see, has bits and pieces in every industry. Every industry will be impacted um, by adding AI into the mix. Um, and though talk about AI first and all these types of things. There are lots of processes that will be adopted and adapted to the use of AI. Um, and so, uh, uh, not to fear, you won't be in unfamiliar territory all the time. Um, you can take some of the what you do know and add what you are learning or upskilling to that, right? So that's our BOMAC talk for stage two, stage three. Um, Next Friday, we will cover the exit event, right? When the asset exits, the aftermath, um, in this context, in this stage framework, deprovisioning, ghost accounts, AI agent orphaning, and the post-employment AI footprint that survives how long after that person is gone? Mm, let's BOMAC talk about it. We'll see you next week. That's our BOMAC talk for today.